Welcome to Boys in the Hood TV. Today we're going to be discussing the life of a Looters Park Piru member named C.K. Vell. Now, Vell McCattery was born December 4th, 1975. Vell will be raised on the east side of Compton, and he was related to the notorious Nunn family. He was the nephew of two OGs from Looters Park, China Dog and Cynthia Nunn. Now, Vell had a twin sister whom he was very close with since they were kids. Eventually, Vell would be put on to Looters Park and would start running the streets. Now, although in the streets, he would graduate Centennial High School in Compton, where he would get his diploma around 1993. Now, around this same time, the streets of Compton was an active war zone between the Crips and the Pirus. Now, Vell's hood, Looters Park, was also beefing with the rival Hispanic set known as Compton Vadio, 7-O's. Now, things would really heat up in the mid-90s with Suge Knight and Death Row Records. Now, with Suge being heavily affiliated with the mob Pirus, he would hire them as security, plus also employ members of Looters Park. Now, with this happening, this was an opportunity for a lot of gangbangers to make some legal money. But even with this happening, the streets were still on fire, and one gang in particular that had beef with both Looters Park and mob was the South Side Compton Crips. Now, this beef was already at a high point. But in 1996, a full-fledged war would kick off after Trayvon Lane from MOB would get his chain snatched. And in retaliation, Tupac would assault Baby Lane from Southside in Las Vegas. Now, this choice by Tupac will ultimately lead to him being gunned down just hours later by the Southside Crips. Now, although Pac was not an actual member of MOB or Looters, his murder happened on the watch of the Pirus. So they felt like an attack on Pac was an attack on them. So with the accumulation of the chain snatching and Pac's death, all hell would break loose in the streets of Compton. Now, just 2 days after Pac's death, on September 9th, the Pirus will hold a meeting at Looters Park. Now, in attendance were MOB, Looters, and Elm Street, and a few members from Fruitown. Now, Vell was in attendance, representing Looters Park also. Now, the MOB wanted to take the war to the South Side Crips, and the main plan was to target all the OGs, which included Keefy D and Lil Brim and others. So the members of Looters Park, OG Money, Vell, Spook, and Ace would agree that they was down to help out MOB with this war with the South Side Crips. So later that night, Vell, along with other members from Looters Park, went out looking for Crips in Compton while driving a Nissan Altima. While riding down Alondra Boulevard, they would spot two Southside Crips outside a liquor store on the corner. It was Lil Brim and another member named Lil Spank. Now, Looters Park would pull up near the curb, and that's when Vell and Spook will hop out and start blasting. Vell had a 9mm and Spook had a Trey 80. Now, Brim and Spank attempted to both run, but Brim would be hit 7 times in his back, causing him to collapse and fall on top of a 10-year-old girl. As Vell and Spook approached Brim to finish the job, that's when they both realized that a 10-year-old girl had been accidentally shot with a stray bullet. Both men would lower their guns and then hop back into the car and flee the scene. By the time police arrived on scene, both Brim and the 10-year-old girl would be transported to a nearby hospital, and both would survive their injuries. Now, the following day, on September 10th, there would be 3 back-and-forth shootings between the Southside and the Pirus. But also that same day, Vell, along with Spook, would show up to Looters Park, telling the homies how they caught Lil Brim from Southside slipping and shot him in his back. Now, further discussion would come up that their next target was Southside member Corey Edwards. Now, the Pirus were well aware that Corey Edwards sometimes moved around, but mostly he stayed on Mayo Street. So the next day, on September 11th, the Pirus, including Vell, would head over to the Southside hood while driving a 1980s hatchback Honda. While driving down Mayo, they would spot a black male sitting inside a new Acura. That man inside was 30-year-old Bobby Finch. Now, Bobby Finch wasn't a gang member, but he did grow up in the Southside hood, and some of his best friends were Southside Crips. Now, as Bobby sat in his car, the Pirus would slowly pull up next to him and open fire. Finch would be hit multiple times in his chest, leaving him fighting for his life behind the wheel of that car. Now, neighbors would call 911, and Finch would be rushed to Martin Luther King Hospital, where he would be pronounced dead shortly after arriving. After Finch's death, The next few days was pure chaos, with Southside striking back, killing a member of Fruitown and Elm Street Piru in a single drive-by shooting. Now on September 14th, the Pirus will be back to look for retaliation. Vell, along with 2 other Piru members, will head down to 121 North Chester Street. Now this block was directly in Chester Street Compton Crips hood, who were allies with the Southside Compton Crips. Now the Pirus will pull the car over and hop out and walk on foot. They would spot 3 Crips. Now as they approached the group, they would open fire. They would let off several shots, hitting all 3 victims before running back to the car and fleeing the scene. Now afterwards, once police arrived, witnesses would tell the cops that they saw 3 blood gang members open fire before fleeing. Now all 3 victims would survive their injuries. Now eventually the intensity of the war would start to calm down, but Vell was still active in the streets. Now a lot of times, Vell will be seen out not only with Looters Park members, but also Elm Street members like G-Man. Now although he stayed in Compton, Vell would also have a spot out and down in California, where he would go back and forth from time to time. Now with this war between Southside calming down, another war was brewing between the Pirus and the Compton Vadio 70s. And this would lead to Vell and others having shootouts with the 7-0s on multiple occasions. And in one situation, some of Vell's homies end up getting shot, but ultimately they will survive their injuries. Now around 1998, while attending the football game at Looters, the OGs would tell Vell and other Piru members to stay on point because the 7-0s were trying to catch the homies slipping. And at this time, the Compton Vadio 7-0s had nearly 400 members, and they were extremely active throughout the streets of Compton. But Vell was militant by the way he moved in the streets and was always aware of his surroundings. But sadly, death would eventually come knocking on his door. On June 25th, 1998, while out and about in Compton, Vell will be approached by members of CV70s who will then pull out a gun and shoot him multiple times. Vell will be transported to the hospital, where later he will be pronounced dead due to his injuries. Now the death of C.K. Vell will kick off a violent war between the Compton Pirus and the Compton Vadio 7-0s, and this will cost the lives of many people on both sides. I would like to thank everybody for tapping in, and I will see y'all next time.